Preparedness planning is the first step in managing risk on an incident. Long before the incident occurs, decision makers and fire managers need to address the hard issues and increase the decision space and the amount of time firefighters have when the incident actually occurs. The plan itself may not be perfect, but the effort put into that plan will reap huge rewards when time is limited. The Prescott National Forest is located in Yavapai County in central Arizona, approximately 100 miles north of the city of Phoenix. The Bradshaw Mountains dominate the south end of the forest and are characterized by a rapid transition from the upper Sonoran desert floor through steep, rugged oak and chaparral-covered slopes to ponderosa pine at the higher elevations. Also located at the higher elevations is some of the most sought-after real estate in the Southwest and the home to over 50,000 people. As we see the surface ownership map of the forest, you can see the heavy fragmentation. That fragmentation represents a number of outlying communities around the city of Prescott that are surrounded by the National Forest. These smaller communities add to the already complicated wildland-urban interface scenario. While the situation in the Prescott area is not necessarily unique, the aggressive approach to managing the wildland-urban interface problem and the events that unfolded on May 15, 2002 are worth further discussion.
With its small-town atmosphere and cool pine forests, the mile-high city of Prescott, Arizona is a desirable and growing community. With Prescott's growth, urban forest interface has put upscale subdivisions with their luxury homes deep into the ponderosa pines that border the surrounding Prescott National Forest. May 2002. Continuing drought conditions and high winds set the stage for what was to be the most damaging forest fire to date for the city of Prescott, Arizona. Only 3/4 of an inch of precipitation in the last 5 months has left the surrounding Prescott National Forest a tinderbox. The trees in the forest have less moisture than kiln-dried lumber. Newspapers, radio, and television repeat warnings that this could be the worst fire season ever. Smoking restrictions and campfire bans have been in effect since April. On the afternoon of May 15th, smoke was spotted near Indian Creek Campground in the Prescott National Forest.
Getting the first notification, we heard it come over the radio, and then the Forest Service, I guess it was probably you, asking for some help right away, and nobody was even on the scene. Pretty amazing.
I just remember, God, I just remember sitting in the fire center and listening to the call coming. It was that call that we'd always talked about, south of town, a quick developing column of smoke, and listening to the helicopter getting on scene as I was coming in, and we're going, oh my gosh, we're going to have a major fire going in here, and I remember having a conversation with a district ranger, and he says, what do you think? And
On the afternoon of May 15th, at approximately 14:45, a smoke was reported near the Indian Creek Campground and within a few hundred yards of the community of Ponderosa Park. The Forest Service responded to initial attack engines from Station 71 in Prescott. Station 71 is the City of Prescott Fire Department station, but under a cooperative agreement houses Forest Service Type 3 and Type 6 initial attack engines. The Forest Service duty officer that day was responding from the Prescott Fire Center. Based upon the smoke report and initial size-up, Additional resources were also launched, including a Type 3 helicopter, air attack, air tankers, Prescott hotshot crew, and additional resources available in the zone were moved towards the Indian fire. These resources converged on the Indian fire and quickly established the incident command system as outlined in the Interagency Fire and Emergency Management Group Operations Guide. The first objective was to evacuate the citizens in Indian Creek Campground and begin evacuations in Ponderosa Park while establishing structure protection and an anchor point on the fire.
Well, it's the thing we drilled about. And you talk about having a plan and being able to work the plan, and that's what we had done. 2 weeks prior to this fire occurring, we actually had it on the ground. We had this fire simulated with on-the-ground evacuations with law enforcement. And to think about that happening in mid-April, because we knew that we were in for a long season based on the things that had occurred, the dryness and what the ERCs were showing, and then to actually get to flip the switch and make all those things happen, it all came together. And it wouldn't have without the relationship. I remember being...
Throughout this case study, the Prescott Area Wildland-Urban Interface Commission will often be referenced. POWIC, as it's known locally, was formed up in 1990 and is a chartered group of citizens and agency representatives given the express task of identifying, prioritizing, and guiding the management of wildland-urban interface issues in the Prescott area.
Traditionally, the Ed Hollinshead approach of having it community driven.
Well, I agree.
I really thought that was going to fall on its face, and you look at these commission meetings that they do right now, there's still 30 people, volunteers, engaged, and wanting to direct or at least provide the vision for the agencies and that conduit to keep everything together.
It's so unique to see the Forest Service coming to those POWIC community-based agencies saying, we have a bark beetle infestation and we have all this biomass. Can you help us, get rid of the biomass? And now look what they have. They, 8 years after the fact, they have a cement plant that's going to be 50%, dependent on biomass, and that would have never happened without that citizens-based group driving that, because the federal government just doesn't have the time, with all the other things on the plate, I think, to really get that. The Prescott Wildland-Urban Interface Commission, with their conception of their website, and going to their meetings monthly, and we listen to anytime there's a prescribed burn or anytime there's an event, they're going to that website and they're getting 3,000 hits in a day or whatever. I think, the community-based or the community involvement has now grown and matured to the point where people in the community are concerned.
A subgroup of the Prescott Area Wildland-Urban Interface Commission is the Interagency Fire and Emergency Management Group. This group, with oversight by the County Emergency Management Coordinator, is composed of senior officers from the firefighting, law enforcement, and first responder community. This group of operators was tasked with developing a comprehensive response plan, suitable for any disaster, but designed around a major wildfire. The plan evolved into an operations guide that was suitable for every incident, every time. It was practiced time and time again in simulations, field exercises, and on many of the small fires that occurred in the interagency arena. It addressed everything from communications to administrative responsibilities. The initial actions on the Indian fire proved successful, as ground crews and aircraft were able to establish an anchor point and eliminate the threat to Ponderosa Park.
We were just sitting there going, oh my God, and it was like there were so many things that happened unsaid that we had drilled about, assuming command and then the city's role in structure protection. I remember, Prescott hotshots coming in and anchoring and flanking. We had a first concern about Ponderosa Park and how that was going to be our concern. And then we turned the corner at Ponderosa Park and it got into that canyon, and we said, okay, we know we have another game.
Once the anchor point was established, the plan was textbook in nature. Using existing roads, box in the Indian fire in the smallest possible size. The Indian fire was moving northward. Highway 89 had been closed and was going to be used as the primary control feature for both the west side and the north portions of the fire. Additional roads could be used to box in the fire on the north and east flanks. The Indian fire, however, had other plans as it moved into the canopies of the brush and the ponderosa pine. 1 hour from ignition, conditions aligned for the Indian fire. It jumped Highway 89 without any hesitation and began moving north. It is no longer just another initial attack. The Indian fire has set its sights on the city of Prescott. Thousands of people lie in harm's way, and time is running out.
I just remember those drills that just seemed like they were agonizing. When we first started, it was like, who is really in charge here? You know, and we all kind of went back and forth about that, and then then as this thing is unfolding, like you said, in front of us, guys like Jim Clausen who come up and had that law branch covered, and we had an evacuation going on. It was seamless. He organized the city and the sheriff's department because he had a relationship with them and they trusted him, and we were able to do quick evaluations. I remember Nick Angelillo, the EOC coordinator, calling and saying, hey, we've got your evac places, we've got shelters, we got Red Cross in them. All the stuff that you're engaged in tactics and you weren't thinking about due to the drills that we had, it was all coming together, and it was kind of like, okay, we got it, and we got the stuff covered. But in the back of your mind, you're still going, okay, we drilled and we drilled and we drilled. How successful are we going to be?
The fight against the Indian fire had actually started a decade earlier, when the planners sat down at the table and said, what can we do to promote a healthy forest and still protect our communities? One of the major projects designed to protect the Prescott area and the outlying communities was known as the Boundary Project. A series of prescribed burns and mechanical treatments linked together to form defensible space around communities. The Boundary Project was huge in scope and required significant outreach to the community. Both Powwick and the Forest Service knew that mechanical treatments and prescribed burning must have community support. Town hall meetings, guest speakers, and simulations were all designed to inform the public of the true problem associated with the urban interface.
And as we took that Boundary Project, that EA from the Boundary Project, and spending all that time and energy on NEPA getting it done, and as the plan unfolded, the community was still nervous about it. Like I said, they were seeing forests being manipulated that wasn't, quote unquote, the snapshot of what they thought the forest should be.
One of the significant keys to success in marketing this program was the sharing of risk. The Forest Service, Powwick, and the fire departments and fire districts stood side by side at community meetings and demonstrated a shared risk and a shared vision.
Reporter we could get out, every article we could get out, we could PR the success of the fuels treatment based on initial attack start or a fire start, and people started to see the vision. Working with the city of Prescott and the fuels treatment projects they've done on the other side of the fence has only enhanced the ability of the federal projects.
Given the conditions that day, it would be unrealistic to expect the fuel treatments alone to stop the fire. The city itself has a continuous fuel bed of ponderosa pine and chaparral. There is no clearly distinct line between the forest and the city, other than the addition of homes. The firefighters know that if the Indian fire breaches the fuel treatments, then the potential for a house-to-house conflagration within Prescott is very real.
Everybody knew the job, I think, as you said, and it was refreshing to see it fall together, and that organized chaos that we get to, and people knew who was in charge, and there was clear leader's intent that we were going to get in here, anchor and flank a fire, and still be able to do structure protection at the same time. That would have not happened without, I think, some relationships that you and I inherited. I think you were at the beginning, me as a fire management officer later.
Prescott and Central Yavapai fire districts. There are at least 4 to 5 air tankers in the air. More are on the way, according to Gary Whitman, and they're trying to get as many assets as possible to fight this blaze, which is dangerously close to the Prescott area, basically within Prescott at this point. So Highway 89 South is closed. Don't go anywhere near it, folks. It is closed originally at Ponderosa Park. I imagine that area is now extended a little bit in both directions. Don't even go in that area. Stay away from that area, even if you live.
But I think there's a huge thing, and that's just like with any relationship, and that's the trust. It doesn't come overnight. If you look at us working together from 1990, and then this event happening 12 years later, you know, I wanted it to happen a lot faster than it did, but it took time. It took time to build that relationship to where there was trust, that you could throw city engines at this type of in this type of an environment and actually accomplish something without jeopardizing safety.
Additional resources continue to trickle in, and much-needed aircraft are quickly put to use. The local incident command structure is able to absorb these resources, and they realize they are on their own for the fight for Prescott.
I remember getting a call from Scott Hunt at the state, and he says, hey, what I'd like to do is put everything on one delegation. State, city, the county, or the fire district will all sign off of it and delegate it to the incoming team. At that point in time, being the fire chief and then understanding that this is not our fire. I don't care if it's moving, chunking through the city of Prescott. We're going to go to the most qualified people that can get us the resources that we need to take care of our community. And on the other hand, from the city's perspective, even though it started on the forest, to delegate all the authority over to a national federal team was a big deal, where the mayor and city manager and the council trusted my judgment that, hey, we're signing it over.
Well, I think that you make a great point because, like I said, at the time, Ernie Del Rio's a district ranger, and and he hadn't had time to build those relationships that we had. And Mike King, the forest supervisor at the time, he did have some time, but they really looked at us and I think that really sealed the deal as far as we were on the same page with each other. And I remember visiting with the district ranger time after time, him and I standing next to each other as we're making decisions to order, what level of management is going to come in, and your decisions, the feedback about delegations and EOCs, and I'm blown away with the fact that we are successful because of the relationships.
Over a dozen aircraft are on scene and assigned to the west flank of the fire. The head of the fire is still moving unabated towards the north. The commanders that day make a critical decision to utilize the existing fuel treatments and go on the offensive.
Everybody knew their role, and they went to work, of course, under the direction. We knew what needed to occur, and it just started happening. And you wonder sometimes how you can get that coordinated, evacuating 1,500 people, putting structure protection groups together, and just making that happen with our pretty limited resources.
The creativity that went with that, I think, with Arizona State Land, on the mutual aid response and having engines coming in and backfilling stations.
As the fight to save Prescott reached its climax, a burnout operation was started along Highway 89, utilizing the existing fuel treatments, dirt roads, and the main highway. The burnout is identified here in purple. The head of the fire was moving into an area known as the brush crush, a mechanical manipulation of chaparral fuels, shown here in blue. This brush crush was unable to stop the fire, but it greatly changed the fire environment, from a running crown fire to a surface fire where aircraft could be much more effective. The combination of well-thought-out fuel treatments and aggressive firefighting on both the ground and the air minimized the amount of fire that actually breached the firefighters' lines. The fire managed to impact several homes, mainly homes that had not been treated for defensible space. However, some spot fires did ignite additional dwellings. Firefighters worked structure to structure, house to house, and managed to save a number of homes. The Indian fire destroyed 5 homes that day, but that number could have easily been 500 or perhaps even 5,000.
Yeah, and I look back when I first arrived here in 1985, where there were the green trucks that fought forest fires and the red trucks that fought structure fires. And there wasn't a shared risk. It wasn't a vision of we need each other at that point in time. Now that happened, but it took some time to do that. And I think you look over the landscape and you say, hey, this isn't the Forest Service's problem. This is everybody's problem. This is the city's problem, the fire district's problem, the state's problem, and everybody needs to be engaged on that so that the risk is shared and not shouldered by one agency.
To see that here and not always see it in all communities is pretty interesting. You and I travel all over the place, and we see that the mistrust and the no trust and the relationships that aren't built, that we're trying to build during the emergency or after the emergency, and then you're arguing science and emotion, and that's such a tough thing to do sometimes.
That's right. Well, I look at too, this is one little piece, and there will be another event, and we had always talked about this, that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you look at the communities across the United States, specifically in the West, that are at risk, that an ego or two here are preventing the cooperation that's necessary to, maybe they won't all have the outcome of this, but if they can save a firefighter's life or save a few homes or whatever, I mean, that's the key here. And we could have both had big egos and said, we're not doing that. I want to be in charge. Or we don't need to look at this from the standpoint of sharing the risk. But I'm just thankful that I live in a community that had that.